Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Emil Molander. I'm a lecturer of Swedish as a second language at Umeå University in northern Sweden. And I'm also an author of textbooks in professional Swedish, which is why I'm here today. I would like to start by thanking the EAFT and Henrik Nilsson for giving me the opportunity to join you here today as a non-terminologist to talk about some of my work. My talk here today regards practical use of terminology in second language learning. I've been teaching Swedish as a second language to adult immigrants since 2008. And as you may be aware, Sweden has had a relatively large influx of people in the past few decades, particularly in the years around 2015, when 100 to 160,000 immigrants per year came to Sweden, mainly as a result of the situation in Syria. Naturally, this led to a tremendous need for Swedish classes, which are in Sweden free of charge for all documented immigrants. Another challenge concerns immigrants with a higher education, which in the case of the Syrian refugees was around 1/3 of everybody who came. They need to reach a level of Swedish that makes them employable in the right sector, preferably. And at the same time, there is a big need for a skilled workforce in many sectors in Sweden due to demographic factors such as retirements. And one of those sectors is the energy sector. The power companies, to make it simple. In this context, there's a non-profit industry and special interest organization for Swedish energy companies called Swedenergy. And they decided to produce a textbook of professional Swedish for their industry. To help and to improve the chances of immigrants coming to work in energy companies, learning the right type of language and terminology for the workplace. And my colleague, Sophie Tegsveden Devaux, and I were asked to make this project happen. And we naturally said, yes, we would very much like that. Now, the task was to cover 3 common professions in the book. The first one was operations technicians working at district heating plants. This is large power plants using household waste as fuel to heat water that is distributed all over town to heat people's houses and their tap water. This is a picture from the book that we used to gives you an idea of how it works. The second profession was distribution technicians, which is the type of electricians who make sure the power grid is in working order and who fix any problems, such as cables accidentally cut in half or a tree falling over a power line. And the third profession was leading technicians who sit in front of a computer screen and keep track of the power grid. They tell the distribution technicians where to go. Now, I'm a language teacher, so I know almost nothing about the power grid or district heating plants or even the difference between watts and volts. But what I do know is how to identify what aspects of written and spoken communications are hard to understand, hard to pronounce, or hard to use for second language learners. So, how did we do it? I embarked on a mission to map the language used within these 3 professional contexts by conducting observations, audio recordings also in the field. I took my little recording device, placed it around my neck, and followed these technicians around all day, taking part in their daily activities, fixing cables and running around in the district heating plant, which was 8 stories high. So my legs were aching a bit afterwards. So I collected a lot of data. And from there, we picked a handful of common situations and communication patterns for the book. This included, for example, calling someone over the intercom to tell them about a technical problem, which is something they do quite often. or completing a health and safety report, or other types of forms such as the one you see here. And the interesting thing here is that we ended up not basing the content on certain technical terms. Instead, common tasks, common situations, and the communication around those situations appeared much more crucial than some kind of essential terminology or important words or phrases. One situation was when something was stuck in the furnace or of the heating plant, or when a tree had fallen over a power line somewhere out in the woods. What do these professionals say to each other in those situations? How do they start their conversations? Do they say hello, or how does it work? How do they keep the conversation going? How do they signal to each other that they're done? This is something that we looked at quite a lot. So, what did we learn terminology-wise? Well, one major takeaway was that within these three different professions, communication was very local and very colloquial. They used a lot of nicknames for people, for places in the heating plant, for example, nicknames for tools, rather than the formal names and terms. One example is this tool right here, which in Swedish formally is called the spaklyftblock. It's a type of pulley, but everyone at the workplace called it lugal, because that was the name that was written on the side. That's the company name, Lag-all. But in Swedish pronunciation, it's lugal. It even took them a while to tell me what the real name or the formal name of this tool is, because some of them, native Swedes, they didn't even know the formal name. It was a lugal to them. And another frequent word that I recorded was the word shit. They use this for many things. One was naturally at the heating plant, the waste that they put into the furnace to burn, that was called shit. And especially when it was of low quality, they call it shit fuel. And but other things too, or when something went wrong, that was also shit, of course. And people could even be shit. And now we had a reference group of native speakers, professionals in these fields, and we showed them the work for comments. And some of them were not particularly happy about us using the word shit or even lugal in the book, because they felt that immigrants need to learn proper language, which to them was the terminology that they themselves acquired when learning the profession as Swedes. Some of these native professionals in the focus group, they struggled to recognize the different learning processes for native speakers and non-native speakers learning a professional language, which is characterized by the way that the non-native speakers, they are already familiar with the concepts that the terminology refers to, but they're not yet fluent in the linguistic context of those terms, which was somehow hard to grasp for the native speakers. They sort of figured that it was the same to learn it as in your first language as in your second language. After a lot of discussions, we did finally use the type of language that was commonly used in the workplace, and not some kind of idealized version where people go around saying spaklyftblock instead of lugal. So I was very happy that we reached that conclusions. We even have some shit in the book too. Now the book is called Energisvenska. It's available free of charge in print or as a PDF to anyone who needs it. Now, in conclusion, my focus as a teacher is on everyday communication and basic vocabulary, even for professionals going into the workplace. Terminology, multilingual collections and lists certainly have their place in second language learning in a professional context. However, that part of the journey to mastering a new language is far more tangible, far easier to comprehend, far easier to learn as an adult in the workplace compared to, say, other parts of the language like grammar or pronunciation and all the pragmatic aspects, of course, that vary across cultures. And the terminology in your field, when you as a professional in a new country, is usually something that you're interested in, something that you can see the use of, something that you can easily see the point of learning. But on the other hand, understanding how we use the past tense in Swedish and which adverbials go with which tense is not as clear or interesting. And neither is the importance of intonation and stress and pronunciation, even though this is something that you're forced to use every day in almost every type of communication, in the workplace and outside of the workplace. Now, at work, we benefit, of course, every day from the ability to be precise when we need to, the ability to be vague when that is needed. We need to teach second language professionals how to use the language to achieve what they want in communication with their colleagues. For example, how do you persuade someone without being brusque or impolite? And for a language such as Swedish, we need to teach a lot about what aspects of pronunciation make the difference between being understood or not. And this is unfortunately very often not the case in the current system that we have in this country. I personally believe that we're doing a disservice to immigrants when we focus too much on terminology and its importance in workplace communication. You hear about it a lot. Politicians, everybody say, well, people need to learn the workplace terminology. I don't agree. Well, okay, yeah, they need to learn it, but that's not the point. There are much more pressing areas of language that we need to focus on, such as pronunciation, basic grammar, basic everyday vocabulary, even for the educated professional studying Swedish at a higher level. As a teacher of Swedish as a second language in a workplace context, and as I mentioned earlier, a non-terminologist, specific professional terminology is the least of my worries. Thank you for listening. I'm now available to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much.